The dawn broke quietly over the French countryside, painting the dew-covered wheat fields in a soft golden glow. To anyone passing by, the old farmhouse of Pierre Moreau looked like any other, a place of humble labor and honest living. Chickens clucked in the yard, the windmill creaked lazily in the wind, and the farmer himself moved through the motions of his morning chores. But beneath that ordinary exterior lay one of the most dangerous secrets in all of occupied France. Pierre was not merely a farmer. Beneath his barn floor, hidden behind a stack of hay bales and a false wall, sat a radio transmitter, small, handmade, and illegal. Every night, when the German patrols quieted and the sky turned black, Pierre became the Whisperer, the codename given to him by the French resistance. His broadcasts, though short, carried priceless intelligence, troop movements, railway schedules, coded messages from agents, all sent through the crackling airwaves to London. It had begun 2 years earlier, in 1941, when the Nazis first occupied his village near Rouen. The soldiers had rolled in with their trucks and helmets, taking over the town square and setting up headquarters in the mayor's house. Pierre had watched from his field, clutching his shovel with a quiet fury. The Germans brought rationing, curfews, and fear. The church bells were silenced, even the laughter of children seemed to vanish from the streets. For months, Pierre kept his head down, saying little, working his land, pretending to be just another harmless farmer. But inside, his hatred grew like a storm. The war had taken everything from him. His wife, Isabelle, had died during a bombing raid near Le Havre. His only son, Luc, had fled to join the Free French forces. Pierre had nothing left but his land, and his will to resist. One night, while tending to a broken fence, Pierre noticed a figure limping along the dirt road toward his farm. The man was young, his clothes torn and bloodied. When he collapsed near the gate, Pierre rushed to help him. "Mon Dieu," Pierre whispered. "Who are you?" The man looked up, his voice weak. "Resistance. Name's Henri. Please, they're close." Pierre didn't hesitate. He dragged Henri into the barn, covering him with hay just moments before a German patrol passed by, their boots crunching on the gravel. The soldiers lingered near the gate, scanning the dark fields before moving on. Only when their voices faded did Pierre pull back the hay. Henri was unconscious. For 3 days, Pierre hid him, tending to his wounds and feeding him from his own rations. When Henri finally woke, he revealed the truth: he was a radio operator for the resistance. His team had been ambushed outside the village, and he was the only one who escaped. His transmitter, hidden in a sack of grain, was still intact. Pierre stared at the device, a small black box with wires and dials. "So this is how you speak to London?" he asked. Henri nodded weakly. "But I can't stay. They're looking for me. You must destroy it." Pierre looked at the radio, then at the young man. "No," he said, "I'll keep it safe." And that was how it began. After Henri left, Pierre buried the transmitter beneath the barn floor. At first, he didn't touch it. He told himself it was too dangerous, that one wrong signal could bring death to his door. But one night, as he listened to the distant hum of the windmill and the restless silence of occupation, he couldn't resist. He unearthed the radio, studied its knobs and switches, and, after several failed attempts, managed to tune into a faint British broadcast. The sound of English voices filled his small cellar, and tears welled in his eyes. He wasn't alone anymore. Over time, with the help of resistance pamphlets smuggled through the market, Pierre learned how to operate the transmitter. He built a makeshift antenna inside the windmill, disguising the wires within its wooden frame. Each night, he tapped out coded messages using a simple Morse key. Sometimes, it was news from local farmers who'd seen troop convoys on the roads. Other times, it was personal messages from resistance members to their loved ones in exile. Pierre's broadcasts were brief, never longer than 3 minutes. Any longer, and German radio detection units could triangulate his signal. Still, those 3 minutes carried the heartbeat of the resistance. The British codenamed his transmissions, the farmer's frequency. In London, his messages were received with respect and awe. Reliable, precise, courageous, one intelligence officer wrote in a report. His knowledge of local terrain and enemy movements has saved countless lives. But Pierre never sought glory. For him, it was a way to fight back, a way to keep Isabel's memory alive and to believe that his son was still out there, somewhere, fighting the same battle. By 1943, the Germans had grown increasingly suspicious. Their patrols intensified, and radio detection vans, black trucks with strange antennae, began prowling the countryside. Villagers whispered of arrests and disappearances. Still, Pierre continued. Then one evening, as he was sending a coded message about a munitions train bound for Normandy, he heard the faint crackle of static, followed by a strange click. It wasn't part of the transmission. Someone was listening. Pierre froze. He shut down the transmitter, extinguished his lamp, and waited in the darkness, heart pounding. Minutes later, headlights swept across the walls of his farmhouse. He peered through a crack in the shutters and saw the black van stop near his gate. He moved quickly, grabbing the transmitter and rushing to the barn. Beneath the hayloft, he had dug a small pit months earlier, an escape route leading to an old drainage tunnel that ran under the fields. He hid the radio there, covering it with earth just as the Germans pounded on his door. Off mission. Pierre opened the door, feigning confusion. "What is this?" he said in broken German. "It's late." The officer pushed past him, barking orders. Soldiers began searching every corner, overturning furniture, prying up floorboards. Pierre stood silently, his hands trembling. After nearly an hour, they found nothing. When the officer left, he paused at the door. "If you hear about anyone using a radio," he said coldly, "you tell us. Or next time, this farm burns." Pierre nodded. "Yes, sir." That night, after the trucks disappeared into the distance, Pierre uncovered the radio again. His nerves were on fire, but his resolve hardened. He repaired the antenna, tuned the frequency, and sent one more message to London. "They were here tonight. I am still free. The harvest continues." It was a simple code, meaning his station remained operational. London received it and replied, "Courage, Whisperer. Your work saves lives." Over the next months, Pierre's broadcasts became even more vital. As D-Day approached in 1944, Allied forces needed precise information on German troop placements and supply lines. Pierre relayed maps, convoy schedules, and weather reports, all smuggled to him by resistance members. Sometimes he used children as couriers, their baskets filled with bread concealing tiny slips of paper. Each broadcast was a gamble. The Germans were relentless. Several nearby farms were raided. One night, his neighbor, old Marcel, was dragged from his home and shot, accused of harboring a radio. The entire village attended the funeral in silence, the fear heavy in the air. Still, Pierre refused to stop. "If I stop speaking," he told himself, "they win." Then, one stormy night in late May 1944, a resistance messenger arrived, a teenage girl named Colette, soaked to the bone. "Pierre," she whispered, "this message must reach London tonight. It's about the beaches. They're moving heavy artillery near Caen." Pierre nodded. "Leave it with me." He descended into his cellar, switched on the transmitter, and began tapping the coded message. Rain lashed the roof above him, thunder drowned the faint hum of his equipment. But before he could finish, he heard something, the sound of engines outside. He froze. Through the storm, he heard German voices shouting. They had come back. There was no time to hide the equipment. Pierre grabbed the transmitter and sprinted to the windmill. Lightning flashed as he climbed the creaking steps, his boots slipping on the wet wood. The Germans were already breaking into the farmhouse below. He reached the top of the windmill and set the transmitter on the floor, reconnecting the wires to the antenna. His hands shook as he resumed the transmission. "Artillery. Near Caen. Moving tonight." The dots and dashes came faster now, desperate, urgent. The door below splintered. Soldiers stormed the lower levels, shouting orders. Pierre finished the message and sent one final word, "Vive la France." Then he ripped the transmitter's wires free and hurled it into the spinning blades. Sparks burst in the darkness as the machinery jammed. Moments later, the soldiers reached the top. They found Pierre standing calmly beside the window, his face illuminated by lightning. The officer raised his pistol. "You," he hissed, "are the Whisperer." Pierre smiled faintly. "A farmer," he said. "That's all." A single gunshot echoed through the night. When dawn came, the storm had passed. The windmill stood silent, its blades still. The soldiers left, their mission complete. But they had failed to realize that Pierre's final message had gone through. In London, British intelligence received his signal and immediately alerted Allied command. The next morning, reconnaissance planes confirmed the German artillery's movement, allowing the Allies to redirect their bombing runs. Hundreds of soldiers' lives were saved. 2 weeks later, on June 6, 1944, Allied forces landed on the beaches of Normandy. The tide of the war began to turn. Months after liberation, Luc Moreau, Pierre's son, returned to his village with the Free French troops. He found the farmhouse burned, the fields overgrown, and the windmill half collapsed. But beneath the rubble, he discovered something remarkable: the remnants of his father's transmitter, still connected to the broken antenna. In the ashes of the farmhouse, he found a small metal box. Inside was a note written in Pierre's careful handwriting. "If you find this, my son, know that freedom was worth the price. The land endures, and so does our voice." Luke closed the box and looked toward the windmill. Its charred frame stood against the rising sun, like a monument to quiet defiance. Years later, when peace returned, the villagers rebuilt the windmill, not as a working mill, but as a memorial. A small plaque at its base read, "Here, a farmer spoke for the voiceless." His signal reached across borders, a whisper that became freedom. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the wind blew through the fields just right, the villagers swore they could still hear it, a faint hum, like a radio's static, as if Pierre Moreau was still transmitting, somewhere beyond time, his message of courage and hope.